Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Insurance Town. I'm the Mayor, Heath Sheeran, and the host of this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pumped you're here because I've got my good friend Brian Ahern hanging out, return guest, good friend. It's the most wonderful time of year, and I've got the most wonderful guest for you coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all the good things, whatever you're celebrating this time of year. I am pumped you're here hanging out with me in Insurance Town. We got the lights up. We got the decorations out in town. Excited you're here. Go check out the lights and check out this incredible conversation brought to you by my good friends over at Smart Choice, the fastest growing agency network, hands down, with no annual fees, higher commissions, lower premium thresholds. It's no wonder that 11,000 agencies across the country are using Smart Choice, and they don't want you to bring your existing carriers over to their umbrella. They just want to bring you new ones, and they want to do a commission split with you on the markets they bring to the table. It's unbelievable. You're going to love working with them. Whether you need one market or a gazillion, go to smartchoiceagents.com. Also, I got to talk to you about my new friends over at Hire Mav. Guys, you hate running a call center, and your leads hate getting those calls. I know I hate getting calls. I get 1,000 of those things a day, and I can't get on enough lists for them to stop. But AI is the way to go, and Mav is the AI-powered insurance expert that engages unlimited leads with friendly text message to qualify, also to quote, and to connect prospects to your agents in your office. Swap out your entire call center for one capable AI insurance agent ready to deliver real results. Go to hiremav.com and check it out. And lastly, but definitely not least, my awesome friends over at usecanopy.com. Go to Canopy Connect and check it out because they have not only the one-click solution to getting deck pages and loss runs, but they also have intake platform. If you have not gone to check that out, go to usecanopy.com/Heath and check out the intake platform, check out the one-click solution, and just meet my friends over there. They love working with independent agents, and they love helping you write more business. Usecanopy.com. Guys, I got to get out of the way so you can check out this awesome conversation. I know it's going to be great. He's ready. He's in the waiting room. I'm going to let him in. Let's get this thing started. Let's go. Mr. Brian Ahern, what's going on, my brother?
It's great to see you, Heath. And as I said earlier, biggest thing going on is I'm a grandpa and I'm loving it.
Dude, I wanted to definitely get into that. I know we talked about it off air, but I got teenagers now, so I hope it doesn't happen for me anytime soon. But I have heard being a grandpa is like the greatest thing ever.
Absolutely. We're blessed. My wife watches Emmett 3 days a week. And the
Oh,
best part of the day is when my daughter walks in, she's got him on one hip and she's got her bag on the other. And as soon as he sees me, man, boom, he smiles and I smile and I grab him and we just start playing. It is awesome.
and how old is Emmett now?
He's 8 months old. And so it's so much fun, Heath, because my daughter is going to turn 30 on Saturday, and that's a long time ago. And I still remember her growing up, but re-experiencing it all
Yeah.
and being able to pay attention without the burden of responsibility, but pay attention to things and seeing like day to day and week to week how he's changing, what skills he's getting, and how he's like recognizing my wife and I so much faster and definitely apart from other people. It's just really cool. The development of a human being is a miracle.
Yeah, it is. That is awesome. I love, having kids. I love being able to, see them with their grandparents and, my mom and dad or, my wife's mom and dad. It's just really cool to see that relationship and that bond that they have. And, we don't get the opportunity to, I shouldn't say opportunity, but, they don't stay with their grandma as often. They live down the street. And so they can come see them at ball games and whatnot. And
Mhm.
so, we try to be mindful of not taking advantage of it, but they're
Mhm.
always asking, "Hey, when can we have Emma or Reese or Sydney? When can we have them come over?" And so, it's a lot of fun. So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
we are in the same boat. It's like give them to us every moment you can, and we're going to get to have them for a third overnight on Saturday. Our daughter turns 30, and she and her husband have plans, and so that'll be fun. Just getting more time with them.
How cool is that? Well, I think this is your third trip to Insurance Town, and so we don't have to do the full on walk through memory lane, but I do want the audience that may not have heard those episodes, as we've grown quite a bit since then. Let the new audience members know a little bit about you, kind of a brief skip down memory lane there, and then dig in really deep in the last couple of years of what you've been up to.
Sure. Well, spent 30 plus years in the insurance industry, time with the Travelers Insurance Companies, and then spent time with State Auto Insurance, which was acquired by Liberty prior to my leaving, and came across the work of Dr. Robert Cialdini, who's the most cited living social psychologist in the world on the science of ethical influence. I came across his work more than 20 years ago, and I was just fascinated by it. And so I ultimately got certified by Dr. Cialdini. So I'm one of like a dozen people in the world who can teach his methodology. And I knew it's what I would do with the rest of my career. So everything I was doing at the insurance company, when I was leading the sales training for field people, when I started doing sales training with agents, when I ran the corporate university, everything I was integrating Cialdini's principles of influence. But I also knew I would leave the company one day, and this is what I would do with the rest of my career. And I made that choice at the end of 2018, left the company, have run Influence People full time, where I speak, train, coach, and consult. Primary audience is insurance associations, agencies, and companies, but I have lots of clients outside that. But since I know the industry so well, and I have loved it. Nobody could offer me a corporate job. I don't care what the perks would be. You couldn't offer me something to go back. It's so fun to own the business and wake up every day and sink or swim with my decisions.
Dude, that's awesome. And I know that you are also a published author. We talked about your book, Influence People, I believe, was it last time we talked, or maybe the time before. And so for the audience that hadn't heard that episode or whatnot, give me a little insight in what that was and where that came from with you.
Well, the first book that I wrote, and I just had my fifth book come out last month, but the first
Yeah,
book that I wrote, Influence People, I call it a business psychology book. I took a lot of the writing that I had done for quite some time. I've been blogging weekly for now more than 15 years. That's a lot of writing.
yeah, it
And
is.
I took a lot of the what I had written and recomposed and recompiled things and moved around and put it together and ultimately came out with that first book. It looks at how to take Cialdini's principles and put them into application in business. It looks at business case studies, use in social media, things like that. So very general book on how to take his work and actually put it into practice. Then I wrote a follow-up book called Persuasive Selling for Relationship-Driven Insurance Agents. And so it's exactly what it says. It's how do you take the psychology and apply it through the sales cycle, starting with prospecting all the way through referrals. What's the best psychology? Why? What are insurance examples? And then the last couple of books were what I would call a business parable, a story format to teach the psychology. Because I know some people are not going to read a business psychology book, and some people are not going to pick up a sales book, even if they're in sales. So I wrote a story format and taught the principles. And then the latest book is called Influenced from Above. And it takes that same character from the prior book, but he's retired, he's looking for purpose, and he finds it working with his church on a building project for the community. And he has to learn how to integrate Cialdini's principles with his faith belief. And that's what the book really focuses on.
Yeah. Is any of this autobiographical? I can't say that word. Is any of that, part of your life putting in there, influenced by your own personal life, or just, getting straight out of the head?
Um, yes, both books, The Influencer and Influenced from Above, take a lot of things that I have experienced in life and put them into practice. So in the book, The Influencer, all the characters are based on people I learned things from during my career. And then the new book, Faith is the most important thing for me. And so the opportunity to bring together two things that mean so much, teaching people how to ethically influence and faith, that is completely unique to me. In fact, when Cialdini read it, he said he had never seen anything like it. Anybody who had tried to connect his principles with something that was spiritual or faith-based. So it's totally unique in that regard, and it reflects Brian Ahern's view of how we utilize Cialdini's work and my view of faith.
Yeah, I love the word, influence and where that come from because I've been exploring some of this. I've heard several times on different podcasts and different things I read and consume in my own content. And there's this whole idea out there that social media is no longer social media. It's now what people are calling influencer media or influence media. And, based on this principle that, people, go to social media channels, to be influenced by things, or the algorithms are showing you things that influence you. And it's no longer necessarily about, people going to reach out and say, "Hey, how you doing, Brian? How's life?" or searching your page for this or that. It's more about influencers and about things of that nature. And I wonder your thoughts on that, if you're seeing anything like that, or if you would agree with that social media is not as social as much as it more is about influence.
I think you're right. I always tell people, and any of your listeners who want to connect with me, if they reach out to me on LinkedIn, it's a guarantee that they will hear from me personally. I'll either be saying, "Hey, how did you find me?" Or if they
Yeah,
say, "I heard you on the podcast," I'll say, "Thanks, and we'll have a little back and forth about you and the podcast." But they're going to hear from me because I say that keeps the social in social media.
100%.
I do agree that I think people who have figured out a tool or understand algorithms are hacking those. And unfortunately, a lot of the information that's out there, yeah, it may get clicks, but watching more cat videos or
Yeah.
fake AI where a mom beats up a gorilla and takes her baby back stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it's it's not doing anything to advance the human race. And that's not the kind of stuff that I do. I want to teach people, when they are engaged with people in communication, how do you how do you have the best communication possible so that people see the merits of your product or service or your idea, and hopefully you hear yes with that. So very different, even though the word my company's influence people, and you hear the term influencers, they're night and day different.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think, you know, me growing up in, the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, I guess, even in my, early 20s or late 20s, 30s, whatnot, it was different ball game when you use the word influence than like you just mentioned now. And even now with social media, anyone could be a star now. Anyone can be, have that viral moment. Anyone can use social media now to influence, again, different definition than you're looking at. But I still think even with some of the principles you're talking about, there's a lot of that can be done the right way in leadership online, whether it's social media channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, whatever it might be. And I wonder, as you consult with people and you talk to different audiences and groups, if those kind of topics come up, talking about how to influence better online or how to be more responsible with your influencer type status.
Yeah. That question comes up a lot about, does this stuff, meaning Cialdini's principles, does this still work? Long ago, people were saying, does this stuff really work with email? Then it was, does it really work when you're texting? Does this really work now when you're online? And my answer is absolutely it does. The medium has changed, right? I can't have a lengthy text like I might have a relatively lengthy email. So I have to figure out how I'm going to be most influential in those few words that I'm going to be conveying to somebody else. But the human brain hasn't changed in more than 30,000 years in any significant way, according to all the literature I've read. So we're operating with the same system. And if we understand how people think and behave, and then we're willing to change how we communicate, it makes it easier for them to say yes to us. It's just, again, that the medium has changed. My interaction is different when I'm in person versus online versus on the phone or email. It has to be different. Um, but when you understand these principles, you start learning how to apply them in all those different areas.
Yeah, you're right. And, going back to, and I don't want to camp out here too long, but it's just, again, that word influencer has taken a whole new meaning. But even when I study, uh, in the insurance industry and sales cycles and marketing cycles and whatnot, they say that the average consumer consumes, or the average buyer of a product consumes 3 to 5 pieces of content, before they make a decision. And so they're spending time, people are spending that time, online, whether they go to your website, and maybe they go to your LinkedIn, and maybe the third one is they check out, some content you put out on YouTube or whatever it might be. But I still think within your principles and the Cialdini and even your own books and whatnot, there's still a lot that resonates and that, could obviously, I hate to use the word influence, but influence what you're doing online to help people find your products or, become involved with your company or whatever it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's another evolution to the communication, and that is, and I'll bet you and I'll bet so many people listening to this do this. I start going to chat more and more and more as opposed to Google
Yeah.
because I don't want to get, a whole page of things and start clicking and reading and clicking and reading. I would rather go to a trusted AI source. For me, it's Chat GPT, and put in information and get something back. And then from there, make a decision. Do I want to engage more, and try to find out more? And so it's really important, I think, that people go out and I don't know the term you would call it, but use AI to find yourself. So I went out and said like, hey, gave it some parameters, but I said, who are some of the top influence and persuasion speakers in the world? And I wasn't in the top 10, but I was in the United States, and
Right on.
I was in the top in the insurance industry based on the parameters that I was giving it in
Sure.
terms of getting out and speaking. And that was great because I know that clients that I am working with or potentially working with will probably be going to some form of AI to save themselves time from having to vet all of this different information.
Yeah. I think, and that's a whole nother thing of like, instead of people worrying about, SEO, now they're looking at that, AI optimization and, ChatGPT, I think
Mhm.
it's generative uh, search optimization or generative engine whatever the terminology is. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now. Words are escaping me, but yeah, I think there's a whole nother thing there of people looking to do those types of things, and I think it's interesting. But again, since we're in insurance town and talking about that and some of the things that you've been, the last couple of years, on stages talking about certain things, what are you what are you seeing? Obviously the last 2 or 3 years has really been, wild as we've opened up from the pandemic, and we're still seeing a lot of effects from that. But we're still seeing, in my opinion, a deep rooted need for leadership and a deep rooted need for someone, not, I mean, just in general, for people to stand up and people to lead. And I
Yeah.
think people are scrambling for that. There's a reason why people are spending so much time watching influencers or spending so much time going to these events now that we've opened back up and seeing the stages and talking to leaders. And I think there's a deep rooted human need for that leadership.
Yeah. Even though we have technology that can allow us to not be with human beings, there's nothing like seeing a person and shaking their hands. All right, you and I haven't had a chance to meet in person, but man, that day we do, it's going to be awesome. As
Oh
good as
yeah.
this is, it's going to be even better, because of all the chemical things that happen when you meet somebody or you hug them or you shake their hand or you're in their presence, their energy and stuff. And so with leadership, one of the things that really stood out to me when I left my corporate role 7 years ago, and I started going to different events, particularly company events, and I'm looking around and I'm thinking about how this guy or that guy is like somebody back at my company, right? The
Yeah.
clown, the guy who knows everything,
Yeah.
all those personalities. And I'm like, this is like a Seinfeld episode in the alternate universe.
Yeah.
And it really struck me that they're good insurance people. They really want to do the best they can. And the lever to either succeed or slow that or prevent it is almost always leadership. Leaders who can gain the trust of their team who genuinely care for them and who have an ability to clear the obstacles so that those people can do their job. Those are the leaders who tend to be the most successful. But if you don't have trust, if your team doesn't know that you care for them, if you don't have an ability to clear the obstacles, if you're just kind of doing what's always been done, you can't expect that you're going to have a whole lot of success there. You're going to always get what you always got if you keep doing what you've always done. And so that was probably the biggest thing that stood out to me as I was participating at these various company events.
Yeah. Let me ask you that. I'm interested to know your answer on this. Obviously, I feel like leadership, as we talk about as a general principle, like there's people that say you're born with it. There's people that say, you could be taught leadership principles. But where do you stand on it? Do you believe, that anyone can be a leader? Or do you believe it's that innate, like you're born with this, whether it is, you're born with this ability to, engage the people and attract people to you and you have this magnetic personality, or you're so genuine and you're so serving and you're this way, you attract people that way, or this or that? Or do you feel like there is principles that you can teach anyone to make them a leader?
All of it. The principles that I teach can take somebody from average to good or good to excellent. I'm not saying that somebody who's poor is going to become a great orator because they learn these principles. But what we're always looking to do is, can I get better? And if I can get better, then can I get better from where I am? And some people, it may take them longer to reach the same goal that somebody else might. But a lot of that has to do with so many other factors. So I think about my grandson, Emmett. I have never seen a child who is so happy. I mean, he is always smiling and laughing. And then I look at my daughter, and it's because the love that she gives him. I mean, picking him up and hugging him and kissing him, and that kid feels loved and secure, and that's what opens him up. Now, 15 years from now, and he's in high school, maybe he's a captain of a team, and oh, Emmett, you're a born leader. No, it's because of the environment that he was in that gave him confidence and skills, and he learned how to, positively engage others. So maybe kids like him, but it all goes back to how he's being raised. Now, some kids aren't raised and they can still overcome those, or they find a different way around. But there's so much that's happening by the time we see the person that we say, wow, natural born leader. I don't think people are naturally born that way, but like certain skills, right? Some people are bigger, stronger, faster, smarter. We can all get maybe bigger, stronger, faster, and we can get smarter. We may not catch people who have some of those natural skills, but I think it's the same thing with your ability to influence and lead. You can get better.
Yeah, I would agree. My wife and I always joke, because we do a lot of things together in leadership and whatnot. And she always, says to people like she and I are this great pair because just by default, I end up being that out front leader and on the stage and
Mhm.
speaking and, the loud, gregarious, big personality guy. And she always says I lead from the back, to where, she's doing those little things to make people feel seen and heard. And she's talking to people, building those relationships behind the scenes and, making sure that everyone's included or, picking up serving here and doing those things. And so I think there's different levels of leadership. And I've tried over the years and I've really embraced this idea of servant leadership and trying to step back from some of that. But just my natural personality, I love, I'm not going to lie, I love a spotlight. I love a stage. I love a microphone. I love being out there and, that charging guy, that guy in the front that the Braveheart Frida, like I want to be that guy, but I'm trying to do that better role of that. But I wonder, as we're raising our kids, going back to your talk about Emmett, because not all kids, nobody's the same person, obviously, and
Right.
so everybody has their own DNA and makeup. But it's interesting to see. I don't know if you have more than one daughter, but for me, having three kids, seeing how three of them so different in their leadership, and they were all raised in the same household. And
Hmm.
so to be like, that's so interesting to me to see, one leading in this way, one leading in this way, and my third, my youngest leading in a totally different way. And it's like, I think you're right. There's some of that, um, that as well. And I'll pause for a minute before I ask my next question, but I wonder your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's great that you recognize they're different and they lead in different ways. It's not that we're trying to mold people into one type of person. You know, different organizations need different kinds of leaders because they have
Yeah.
different culture. And somebody may be hugely successful in one culture and not so much in the other. I mean, we see this in football, right? I'm a Steelers fan. They're not doing great this year, but I have noticed that they've had guys on that team who've been all pro and they go somewhere else and no longer because they fit so well. Their skill
Yeah.
set fits so well into the scheme. And I think leadership is the same thing. Do you get the kind of leader that is going to fit and be able to work with this organization? If you don't, it's a total mismatch. So I
Yeah.
think, with your kids, in terms of seeing what their natural abilities are and encouraging those, can make them leaders and very different kinds of leaders. And we need that.
Yeah. I think you're right. And, it's just been something that's been eye opening for me. And then as I sit down with insurance agencies and I visit with carriers and, I've seen some of these things in my travels and speaking events. People are always looking for those leaders. People are always, hiring or looking for this or that. And, when I have conversations with people off stage, they're like, hey, everybody's looking to add staff or add people, but they're always wanting leaders. They're always
Mhm.
wanting this or that. And so, if you're talking to someone, and on the flip side of that, I talk to people all the time that are whatever role, whether they're CSR or a producer or a manager of some sort, they're always wanting to increase in their leadership. I want to be a leader here. I want to, grow in my role. I want to do this or that. As someone who is, a guru in this, so to speak, what do you say to those types of people? I know what I end up saying, but you probably have a much better answer on some of that of like, what are some base things that you would say to someone who says, I'm either A, looking for that leader, or B, I want to be that leader?
Mhm. When you're looking for the leader, I would first start with your culture and what kind of individual do you think is going to be able to move this culture? There was a point in time where State Auto brought in a CEO from outside the company, and the prior CEOs were the kind of guys who they went to the field offices, they walked around, they'd sit down in just anybody's office. They had an incredible ability to remember, their spouse's name and kids and things. People felt connected to them. And then the new guy comes in and he's nothing like that. And I remember giving one of the senior leaders some advice. I said, hey, it would do him well if he would get out and da, da, da. And the person said, he's just not going to change. And I said, you know what? It's easier for one person to change than 2,200. And he was not successful as a leader. Now, he may put out certain metrics to try to make it look like it, but it was an utter failure. If his leadership had been good, the company wouldn't have been in the trouble that it was, that ultimately Liberty acquired the company. So it was a total mismatch. He might have been good in an environment that wasn't relational like we were, but it was a mismatch. So, looking for a leader, you've got to assess your culture and then look for somebody who will fit that culture, but can also accomplish the things that you need. When you talk about somebody who says, I want to be a leader, first question I would ask is why? I
Yeah.
mean, what is your motivation for this? Is it pay? Is it status? Is it but if somebody says like what you said, where you said, I get, I want to be the guy in front and I'll be the guy in charge, you get energy from that. And my wife and I had this discussion many years ago. We came to this realization that we get energy from different spaces.
Yeah.
I, like you, love to be on stage, love to train, do all these things. I am energized by that. It would kill my wife,
Yeah.
but she can go to a party and she'll work the room and meet every person and
Yep.
genuinely be interested. And I'm looking at my watch like, isn't it time to go? That is draining for me. And when we came to that understanding, a lot of the times where we would have, quarrels or disagreements or whatever, we started to go, okay, she'd say, Brian's not being a jerk. He's just tired. This wore him out. Or I would be able to say that too. Jane's not, it's not that Jane's not supporting me. She's just wiped out now by,
Thousand
you know,
percent. Yeah.
yeah. So if
Yeah.
somebody can say, you know what, I just get energized when I'm in front and I want to help people succeed. And, now we're getting down to the motivation part. that I think is going to be critical because most of those positions they go into, we can teach them enough leadership skills for them to probably succeed. And
Sure.
then if they learn more, they can keep rising and keep rising.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And it's funny you say that because it is interesting, to see that because again, my wife and I travel a lot together and we can go to the same event and we always the joke at every event when people know us, we walk in the front door and we split. She'll go in her half of the room and I'll go to mine, and then we meet at the back of the room and we'll discuss on the way home of like, here's the cards I got, who the people I met. You should meet these people and we'll just talk through that. But at the end of the day, she is absolutely like drained when we get in the car on the way home, and I'm fired up and excited, ready to go. And on the flip side of that, of like, if I'm having, like for example, I cooked all day on Wednesday for Thanksgiving a couple of weeks ago, and I was worn out. And then when everybody started showing up, all of a sudden I got this second wind. And I was super excited because people were here. And we had 15 people at our house, and I was like,
Mhm.
and she was like, "How in the world do you have this energy? You just cooked for 12 hours the day before and doing all the food, and now you're just like this Energizer Bunny." I'm like, "It's just people, man." Like as soon as they
Yes.
walked in, as soon as I felt that energy, I just sucked it up, and I was like, "Let's rock." I don't know if that's to do with leadership, but that energy is there. I get it.
Yeah. But certain activities do energize us. Like I have a great friend from my days at State Auto, and and he's actually a character in the book The Influencer is based on him. I've never met a guy who gets so much joy out of giving and helping others. It's as if his happiness is more than yours and you're the one receiving. But he came out in the spring and he said from my wife, he goes, for your birthday, I'm going to redo your garage floor. That epoxy and stuff. Anyway, so he comes out and I'm working with him and he's like, "Isn't this fun?" And I'm like, "No, it's not fun.
Yeah,
I can hardly wait to get done." And he's like, "You don't enjoy this?" And I said, "Pud, would you like to go out and run 5 miles with me?" He's like, "Heck no." I said, "I enjoy that. I get energized."
yeah,
So different activities can take or give us energy.
yeah. I think it all goes back to now that you're saying all this, and then I do want to get into your book here in a minute and some other things, but I don't know if you've studied the EOS system, and it's the traction. There's a book called Traction that came out, and the basic
Mhm.
premise is a lot of things. But when it comes to this, it talks about putting the right people on the right seats on the bus and making sure
Mhm.
they're in the right fit and their right roles and whatnot. And you may have to move some people around different roles. But I
Mhm.
think you're right. We were talking about energy. If you've got someone in your organization, whether it's 2,200 or 8 people or whatever it might be, figuring out are they in the right spot that gives them that energy, and that's going to help them to be better leaders or be better suited in those types of things. And so you know leading back to the conversation of energy and leadership, I do think there's a big thing to be seen there, just because, for example, low hanging fruit here, and I'm going to get chastised probably, but just because you're a female in an agency doesn't mean you have to be a CSR, or
Mhm.
just because you're a dude in an agency doesn't mean you have to be a producer. That energy may be that CSR may get more energy in a better spot if they're out there producing, and maybe they're
Mhm.
a better fit there. Maybe there's a producer out there that's like, man, I really enjoy serving, and servicing policies, and really enjoy those phone conversations and meeting those needs and explaining coverages. And, I think if you
Yeah.
find those right seats, find what energizes people, that's going to help develop those leaders as well.
Yeah. Well, a different industry, but it's advanced a lot more than insurance has when you talk about like roles. Um, when I'm growing up, men were not nurses.
Yeah.
Women were nurses. Men were doctors, right?
Right.
Now you got a
Yeah.
ton of guys who say, "You
Yeah.
know what? I don't want to go through all the med school and stuff, but I have a heart to serve and I want to help people." And so that industry, in terms of what the norms were has changed a lot. And insurance probably needs to follow that lead too, because not everybody is cut out for sales. They may be wonderful people, but it's not even that they're not like nice and they're not outgoing and things, but the drive to, keep pursuing and stuff. Most people don't have that. And that's why a lot of people get into it. They think, "Oh, I'll get rich," and they realize it's hard, and boom, they're out.
1,000%. I wonder, as we're talking through some of these things, have you seen the series The Chosen?
Yes, a couple
Oh
times
my
watched
gosh.
it.
Oh, it's the best. We saw the entire last season in the theater. All we sat through like 6 or 8 hours, whatever it was, but absolutely loved it. Me and my wife and kids, and as I think through and I see that as we talk about leadership, obviously the ultimate leader being Jesus Christ. And no apologies on this podcast for talking religion or anything like that. So, um, but that series brought so much to life. It totally changed my life because it's one thing to read it, but that series just really brought every one of the disciples to life. Mary, Jesus, all the people that served alongside him in his, ministry really came to life. But even talking about the energies and whatnot, there's times that Jesus was energized doing his preaching for 12 hours or whatever it might be. And then he was like, man, I got to go away for a little bit. I got to go to my tent. I got to lay down, leave me alone. Like, not in a rude way, but just like, and they knew that. They're like, okay, we got to let him chill and do his thing. And he'd go right back at it. But watching his style of leadership, and there was
Mhm.
times he was serving and times, and then there was time he was right out in the front and doing the things and being on the stages. And then there was times he was just one-on-one sitting down with the different
Yeah.
disciples individually and sharing and whatnot. Obviously, none of us can be perfect like Christ, but just to see the different styles of leadership. Um, I wondered if you'd seen that and what your thought was coming from your idea of leadership and influence.
I'm totally with you on that. It was a game changer. It's far and away, and I've seen a lot of movies or series about Christ that humanized him to where you could say, I want to follow that guy, right? He wasn't aloof like he is portrayed in certain things. I
Yeah,
mean, they portray a sense of humor. Now, do we know if some of those conversations happened? No, we don't.
right.
So there's a little bit of license there. But do I think he had a sense of humor? Yeah, I think he
He had
probably
to.
had a
Yeah,
great sense of humor. Um, he knew when to be tough. He knew when to be soft. He knew, who needed to be communicated with one on one and who needed to be communicated within a group. He was obviously never afraid to speak forth the truth, even among the disciples. When all of a sudden, well, why is Peter chosen? Why is it him? Why wasn't it me? When it, and he knew that the bickering and things would occur because they're humans and people still do it today. But
yeah,
I thought it was amazing, and there were very few episodes I get through without crying because something
100%.
just touches you so deeply. Like when he has the conversation with little John or little James, and he's questioning, well, why is everybody else getting healed and why am I not
Why can't
getting
you heal me?
healed?
Yeah.
And that scene was just so
Oh,
touching
so
about
good.
how he interacted with him, and that answers so many questions about why not me, Lord? I see this, I see why not me? It was beautiful, and
It was very,
there's so many
yeah.
scenes like that.
There's so many. You're right. And my wife and I, we laugh a lot about, the scene, when it's either season one or two, when they're at the wedding and, they're all dancing and the wine and the water,
Mm.
turning water to wine and everything. And he just looks at, I can't remember which one it was like Andrew, I think it was like, man, you can't dance at all. And they're making fun of each other and teasing and ribbing each
Yeah.
other about how he can't dance very well. And you see them having a good time. And he's, they portray him as like, oh, he doesn't go to parties or he wouldn't go to this because there might be alcohol there or there might be,
Yeah.
swear words or dancing or whatever. But you
Mm.
see Jesus right there in the middle of it, or, making those jokes, or you see him playing, I call it hacky sack, but whatever that game was they played
Yeah.
in the game, the show. But you see him, he could be a guy's guy and doing those things where he could be so
Mm.
intimate with you and spending time with you in that moment. And I don't know, it's just unreal. And so, you being a believer, I was hoping you'd seen. There's another
Mm.
one called David or House of David that's really good on Amazon. That if you like Chosen, you should check that
Mm.
one out. But
Okay.
when you talk about, and I'm assuming your book influence was from above, as you mentioned earlier. But I assumed when I saw that, and I was hoping you would say that above meant not necessarily the C-suite level, but the above being the
No.
ultimate C-suite level of being, God and
Yeah.
Christ. But
Yeah.
talk to me about that a little bit and how this character has evolved. And you talked about him working at the church and, in
Mm.
a building project or whatnot. But,
Mm.
talk about that and even the boldness to put that faith out there on paper.
So when I wrote the book, The Influencer, it's called The Influencer Secrets to Success and Happiness. It was a business parable to teach these principles. And that book ends with the main character, John Andrews, retiring in his early 50s. And when I was done with the book, I thought there's definitely another book here. But I didn't know what or when or anything. But many years ago, when I had done a presentation in town, my daughter had attended, and we had lunch the next day, and she asked a question that sparked the idea for the new book, Influence from Above. We're talking about what I do, and then she said, Dad, what I want to know is where is God in all this? Where does he fit into this psychology that you teach? And just impromptu, we start having this conversation. And I remember telling her, I said, Abigail, in some corporate settings, I can't really talk about love. That's not going to be acceptable. But if I engage this principle of liking the right way, and for your audience, principle of liking simply says it's easier for you to say yes to me if you know me and like me. But the key there is never about me trying to get you, Heath, to like me. It's always about me coming to know and like you. Because when you begin to sense with all of your senses, like you see the look of my eye and the sound of my voice, smile on my face, when you begin to sense this, hey, Brian really cares for me. That's what opens you up to whatever I might be sharing or asking or advising. Because you probably, like most people, believe deep down that friends do right by friends. But the good news is the more I get to know and like you, I do want what's best for you. And so I was telling Abigail this, and I said, that starts getting me very close to love, where I want the best for that person. They sense that, and it changes our relationship. And then we started talking about like reciprocity, right? If I do something kind for you, you feel some obligation to want to do something for me if you can in the future. Well, Jesus said it's better to give than receive. He said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Both are encouraging us to take that first step and give, and to then trust that when we do that with a genuine spirit, people will want to help us because they appreciate that. They know that we care for them. So that's the kind of stuff that the book gets into about how these principles are supported by biblical principles.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think you're right throughout the Bible and throughout even the Old Testament, New Testament, before, Christ was introduced and whatnot, you see these principles throughout the Old Testament of leaders and how, some of them were, in situations that we can all relate to now, in
Mhm.
this day and age of being knocked down, being drugged down,
Mhm.
whether it's, being sold to slavery from your own brothers or being, thrown in a lion's den by somebody you served or by, being honest in situations and this happened or just being told by God, here's what you're going to do. Like, oh, what, me? What? But you see, so much of that coming from a place of humility. And I think
Mhm.
it's where a lot of times nowadays we lack some of that empathy and some of that humility in today's leaders. And I wonder how much of that influences your character of influence from above.
Well, the this part that I'll say is not in the book. It came to me right around the time that the book was published, and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have had that, when I was writing the book. But the acronym that for my company, Influence People, the word people is an acronym which stands for powerful, everyday opportunities to persuade that are lasting and ethical. Lasting and ethical is important, right? When we try to influence somebody, we hope that it takes change and we don't have to persuade our kid to do their homework every day or persuade that employee to get to work on time every day, right? We hope that it has a lasting impact and we want to make sure that we do it ethically so that we can feel good about ourselves. And people really appreciate when I talk about ethical influence. I mean, I have so many people who say, I'm so glad you included the word ethical because they might think of manipulation instead. But with my acronym, people, I'm now talking about L as love and E as eternal because it's human nature. If I lay out the rules of what it means to be an ethical influencer, it just seems to be human nature that we want to bump up to the limit or how far can I go past the limit to and still be okay. Good example everyone can relate to, driving on the highway. Speed limit 65. What do? You probably go 69 to 74 because, cop's not going to pull me over for that. So the human nature, and the Bible talks about this too, that it's human nature that we bump up against the law. It just like draws us to it. If we are focusing on loving the other person, if our thought is love God, love neighbor, the ethical rules start taking care of themselves because I'm not going to look at how close can I get to the rules with you, Heath, so I can still get what I want. My attitude becomes How can I best serve you? What can I do that will genuinely help you? And I naturally start fulfilling the law or the ethics. And for me, even though I've taught this for 20 years now, for me, that's been the biggest aha of this journey, having written the book and starting to talk about it, is how love can come into play, even for us in business, and really take care of something that's so important. And that is, am I operating with integrity?
Yeah, it's something you said to me on the show several years ago that I've used 100 times, and I always give you credit for it. But you said, good for you, good for me, good to go, or good for me,
Yep.
good for you, good to go. I've never forgotten that because that goes back to ethical principle. If you're
Mhm.
taking care of, if you're looking at it from that standpoint, any contract, any relationship, I've always tried to use that principle when people send me contracts to sign, or when I'm looking
Mhm.
to send them a contract, or we're looking at opportunities to do business together, relations, whatever it might be. I'm always thinking, is this good for me and good for them? And I always say that in my head, good for you, good for me, good to go. And I can always appreciate you saying that. But it goes back to the ethical principles you were talking about.
Yep. Yeah. When we're trying to influence people, it can't just be one-sided. It can't just be,
Right.
what's in it for me. And it's unethical people that do that, right? It's the salesperson who doesn't care if the product will do everything that he said it would or she said it would. They just care that they make the sale because they get a commission. That's part of the reason you feel such high pressure in certain things like maybe buying a car or buying a home. You feel that high pressure because they know if you don't buy from them, you might buy from somebody else. And so they start reverting to any tactic they can to ultimately get to a yes. That's not where we want to go. We want to make sure that we're doing right by the people that we are interacting with, that they leave that situation feeling better off. And if you earn a commission or make a dollar on it, that's okay for you too. That's the nature of business. But we don't have to bring it down to the level of manipulation just because there's a big carrot dangling in front of me.
Yeah. How do we, as an industry, as salespeople or service, we're in a service industry, how do we do about that L and that E, that love and, those things that you talk about in a way that, is obviously all the other things, with the PEO and the P, but also able to do that in a way that's not, standoffish, or it's not, something that's too forward on things, or it's not, stepping on toes. They say don't talk about church and politics, but at the same
Mhm.
time, as a Christian, as someone who believes in a higher power, no matter what that power be, if you're listening to this, if it's outside of that, there's still an element of love related in that. And you
Sure.
talked about before, you've not been able to talk about love very often, just more that like principle. How do you do that now? How do we as an industry do that?
Well, the good thing is we can tap into that principle of liking to start getting us closer, right? So if I find out that we have things in common, I tend to like you more because I see you as being similar to myself. That also causes you to like me. If I am looking for the good in you and I pay those compliments, right? You feel good. The endorphins are flowing and you start associating those good feelings with me. And so you like me more. But if I'm being genuine about it and I'm seeing characteristics that are praiseworthy and I verbalize that, I'm convincing myself what a good guy you are, Heath. And so that's what starts drawing me to you and getting me to like you. And if we can keep that relationship going, and in insurance, we are in a relationship business. If we can keep that relationship going, I'm sure that I'm going to find more that we have in common, more things I can complement, and I'm going to be drawn to you as a person. So that's one way that we can do that. C.S. Lewis talked about this in his book, Mere Christianity. He said, how do I love somebody when I don't even like them? And then he said he realized there was somebody that he didn't always like, but he always loved, and that was himself. He said there were parts of himself that he didn't like looking at, he did not like at all, but he recognized, but I still always do what's best for C.S. Lewis. And that freed him up to start being able to love people, even if he could say, I don't really like being around them. But I have found, Heath, that that's pretty few and far between. That if I really begin to employ that principle of liking, I can find things I have in common with people. I can find things that I can compliment them on. And that can open the door potentially to faith-based discussions or any number of other things. I will share one more example, this one happened today. I met for the first time with a potential client, somebody I know very well, connected us. It took quite a while, but we finally had a meeting. And we start off and we're kind of doing the what do you do? And, just finding out things about each other. But at one point, when she started asking about, how do I distinguish myself with the Cialdini stuff? She was familiar with Cialdini. And I said, well, I do that in terms of how I present it and what I write. And I started talking about the books. And then I got to Influenced from Above. And right away, she's like, oh my gosh, that sounds so interesting. She goes, I was going to give Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ to a friend for Christmas. Maybe I'll get your book instead. And all of a sudden, we had that connection, right? She knew I was a believer. I knew she was a believer, and it totally changed the the conversation. So by the end, she's like, what are potential next steps? And I said, well, I speak at conferences. Oh, we have a conference coming up in March. Maybe you could come in. But it was by being honest, having written the book and then talking about it. But then once I saw the things that we had connection on, making sure that we went deeper on those. And you just naturally feel an affinity for that person then.
Yeah, there's so much there that I could unpack, and I know we don't have a ton of time left, but no, I appreciate that and sharing that about that honesty and whatnot. And I talk briefly. I'll tell you part of my story that as I've developed my speaking career, earlier this year, I had the opportunity to speak at an event in Vegas, and I felt God laying a really a topic on my heart, and wanted me to and I wanted to find a way to share not the gospel but share the gospel into or
Mm,
principles of Christianity within my talk. And I had someone tell me, I was like, hey, before you go talk, as you develop one, ask people, that people you're close to, like, what are you about? What would be a good topic for you to talk about? And the more I talk to people, and this sounds funny saying this, I don't mean to say it's bragging or anything, but people would say, you serve.
mm,
You lead with service in everything that you do, whether you're an agent, whether you're a consultant, you're always
mm,
serving, looking for people or ways to serve people. And so I came up with this, topic called out of service,
mm,
talking about how we lead out of service and not out of sales, or we grow our
mm,
business out of service and not out of sales. And so I'd found this way for me to do that, and to be able to share principles of Christianity and serving
mm,
others and putting others first. And it sounds like you've been able to do the same thing in this.
mm.
Obviously, a little more obvious in this book from leading from above and talking about
Right.
church and whatnot. But just real briefly, if you could share with me as we start to wrap up, what has that meant to you as a believer and as a Christian to be able to put that into words and to know that, you're sharing this
Mm.
leadership principles from above?
Um, it's been great. When I started out doing this, I didn't see this down the road. But even though I've been doing it for 20 plus years, it makes it more exciting than ever. And even before I came up with the framework about loving and ethical, I was always thinking about how can I teach these different principles in a way that will be different. I mean, anybody can stand up and define it and then, you know, say certain things, but how you take it and integrate it into your life or you help your clients integrate it into their business, that's the difference maker. And I spoke at an insurance company earlier this fall, and this was so gratifying. I do my presentation, and then I'm talking to somebody when I'm getting a cup of coffee afterwards, and the guy said, early on when you were talking, I thought, man, I feel the spirit of the Lord here. And this is just a secular insurance company. And he said, and then you get to the end and you mentioned that new book. And I thought, oh man, I'm right. And I said, thank you so much for sharing that because I try to incorporate this without being overt. I try to present and incorporate this. And if you're seeing it, then others are probably seeing and sensing it too. So my encouragement to you, Heath, is even without going full on, pastor behind the pulpit thing, there are ways that we can incorporate things or share things that make people go, huh, that's different than I've ever heard somebody put that. Tell me more. And that becomes our door to open because the eternal part of what I'm talking about, I know you get this, and I think people who are listening, many will get it. When it's all said and done, none of this remains. The only thing that's going to remain are the souls of the people whose lives we impacted. And this is, my door to that is through teaching people about influence. Athletes, they've got a whole different platform, right? But I have to use the platform that I've been given, and I do it in a way that's different than most other people. But I want to know that I've had an impact on people. If I can help them enjoy more success and happiness right here and right now, that opens doors for me to deepen the relationship with them and get to the things that matter most.
Amen. And so, just in wrap up, tell me or tell the audience where they can find any or all of your books, and then if you wanted to give a little, if there's something we didn't get to share about influence from above, if you just want to, close out with telling me a little about the book, where they can find it, all that kind of stuff.
Um, so the book, with all my other books, you can find them on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, or if they go to my website, I've got a listing of the books and links there. As far as what I'd want people to know, this guy, like many of us, when you get to the point in life where you stop doing what you've done most of your life, your career, and he's looking for purpose, and he begins to find that as he is serving at his church and helps with the community center. But again, he has to understand that like what's going to motivate people in the congregation is very different than what motivates people in the business, and vice versa. So how do I take these things that help me be so successful at work and these things that I know to be true in the church, and how do I marry those so that I can be the most effective for the body? So there's all kinds of characters that he comes across, and you learn all kinds of ways to communicate and interact with people. At the end of each of the chapters, there is a reflection box. Sometimes it's a question, sometimes it's just a statement, but something to think about. So I would hope that when people read through it, they don't just buzz through it, the story, but they really stop and think, how is what this guy's going through? How could that potentially apply to me in terms of what I do? Because I think you'll get a lot more out of the book. I want the book to have a life-changing impact on people, and that's going to probably be the best way. So if people are so inclined, it's great for people who are maybe in a book club. And the last thing I'll say, Heath, is I had some people, I reached out to a number of people I knew or connected to and said, hey, I got a book coming out. Here's what it's about. I'd really appreciate it if you'd, make a post or a comment or whatever. I had a couple people come back and say, hey, I like you, Brian. I hope your book is a success, but I don't really believe in that. I'm an atheist. And I found myself saying, okay, I respect that. And I respect that you didn't ghost me, but you told me. But if you think that the world would be a better place if people tried to live by some of the things that Jesus said, even if you say you don't believe in God, if you think the world would be better because, if nothing else, he was a great teacher, then I would encourage you to pick up the book because you'll still see how Cialdini's work is supported by much of the wisdom that he shared with people.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And, I hope that people, after they listen to this, will go out and purchase the book and, share that with other people. And, if anyone wants to purchase the book and they can't afford it, reach out to me. I'll buy it for you and I'll send it to you. I appreciate you. I appreciate the man that you are. I appreciate the class of individual and being such a man of integrity. Thank you for all of that. Thank you for joining me again on the program. And I've taken up way too much of your time, but thank you so much for spending time with me. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And, hopefully I'll talk to you real soon.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for giving me the space to talk about the book and going deep on the faith stuff. I look forward to staying connected.
Yes, sir. I'll see you in Little Rock soon.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.